The grand assembly hall of the Coalition flagship hummed with the sounds of a dozen different species. Commander Thexkel stood at the center platform, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. His insectoid features gleamed under the bright lights as he surveyed the fleet commanders gathered before him. "The Harvex pirates have plagued our outer territories for too long," Thexkel announced, his voice booming through the translators. "Today we take back what is ours." Cheers erupted from the Krathir warriors, their mandibles clicking in excitement. The Velixians pulsed with bright energy, their forms shifting between solid and light. Even the ancient Dormath, usually so calm and reserved, showed their approval with slow nods of their massive reptilian heads. At the back of the hall, Admiral Elena Kozlov stood with the other human representatives. She wore a simple gray uniform, no medals or decorations. Her dark eyes watched the proceedings without expression. Around her, the other species towered over the humans, making them look small and insignificant. Thexkel pulled up a holographic map of the fleet formation. "The vanguard will consist of Krathir battleships. Our warriors will break through their defenses first." He gestured to another section. "Velixian cruisers will provide technological superiority and long-range strikes. Dormath dreadnoughts will coordinate strategy with their telepathic networks." He paused, and something like amusement rippled through his features. "The humans will take the rear positions. Supply ships, medical frigates, and support vessels." Several officers laughed openly. "They will handle logistics while real warriors do the fighting." A young Velixian officer spoke up, his form crackling with light. "Commander, the humans have no significant combat victories in their records. Their weapons are still kinetic projectiles. Their faster-than-light drives are generations behind ours. Are they even useful in a military campaign?" More laughter. Kozlov's expression didn't change. She simply stood there, hands clasped behind her back. Thexkel made a dismissive gesture. "Every fleet needs someone to collect the wounded and carry supplies. The humans will serve as scavengers. Let them feel useful picking through debris while we claim glory." A Dormath elder, her scales pale with age, spoke telepathically into everyone's minds. The humans accepted this role without complaint. Perhaps they know their limitations, or perhaps, another Krathir warrior added, they're simply cowards hiding behind braver species. Through it all, Kozlov remained silent. When Thexkel finally dismissed the assembly, she gathered her staff and left without a word. The other species barely noticed them go. Hours later, the massive Coalition fleet prepared for the first jump into Harvex space. Over 300 ships formed up in perfect formation. The mighty Krathir battleships led the way, their hulls covered in battle scars from countless victories. Behind them came the elegant Velixian cruisers, shimmering with barely contained energy. The Dormath dreadnoughts hung in space like ancient temples, powerful and patient. Far behind, almost an afterthought, the human vessels took their positions. They looked plain compared to the others, gray and angular, built with simple metals and basic designs. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, just old-fashioned steel and chemical propulsion. The other species had stopped mocking them openly, but the contempt was clear. On the bridge of her medical frigate, Kozlov watched the fleet formation on her screens. Her first officer, Commander Park, stood beside her. "They think we're useless," Park said quietly. "Let them think that," Kozlov replied. "How are the probes?" "All deployed. Deep Space Monitoring Network is active." Park hesitated. "Admiral, the others don't know what those probes really do." "No, and that's how it needs to stay. For now." The fleet made its first jump. Space twisted and reformed as hundreds of ships crossed light years in seconds. They emerged on the edge of Harvex territory, a region of dead stars and asteroid fields where the pirates made their home. Immediately, the Velixian sensor officers reported strange readings. "Commander Thexkel, we're detecting unusual signatures at the edge of our range. They appear and disappear randomly." "Harvex scouts," Thexkel decided. "Send fighters to investigate." But every time Coalition fighters approached the mysterious sensor readings, they found nothing. Just empty space and cold rocks. Yet the readings continued. Ghostly presences that seemed to watch the fleet from the darkness. On the third day, a Krathir patrol returned shaken. The warrior captain, someone who had fought in 20 major battles, reported something unusual to Thexkel. "Commander, my crew felt watched. During our patrol of Sector 7, every warrior reported the same sensation, as if something was observing us from the shadows. There are no shadows in space, Thexakel replied. Yes, Commander. But we all felt it. The Dormath telepaths tried to sense what the Krathier described, but they found nothing. Still, unease began to spread through the fleet. Warriors who feared nothing started checking their sensors twice. Ships traveled in pairs instead of alone. The human vessels continued their slow patrol at the rear. Their medical ships deployed what they called monitoring probes throughout the region. Strange devices that didn't seem to do much of anything on Coalition sensors. When asked, Kozlov simply said they were for tracking wounded ships. But late at night in the human quarters, encrypted transmissions passed between vessels. Data flowed that no other species could intercept or decode, and on those transmissions Kozlov received updates that made her nod slowly. They're in position, she told Park. All of them? All of them. Following us through dark space just like always. The others still don't suspect? Kozlov allowed herself a small smile. They're too busy laughing at our primitive ships to notice anything else. That's exactly what we need. Outside, in the cold depths of space where sensors couldn't quite reach, something massive moved through the darkness. Not one thing, but many. They slipped between the shadows of asteroids, their forms blending perfectly with the void. They had been following the fleet since it left Coalition space, staying just beyond detection range, waiting, watching, patient as only ancient things could be. And aboard the human ships, officers checked their specialized equipment, technology that looked primitive to other species, but was built for one specific purpose, not to fight wars with energy and plasma, but to keep promises made in humanity's darkest past. The first battle came at dawn, if such a thing existed in deep space. The Coalition vanguard encountered a Harvex pirate fleet near the Kronos Gate, a strategic passage through an asteroid field. Thexcal ordered the attack without hesitation. Krathier battleships charged forward, their warrior crews screaming battle songs. Plasma fire lit up the darkness as Velixian cruisers unleashed devastating energy beams. The Dormath dreadnoughts coordinated everything with their telepathic links, turning the fleet into one perfectly synchronized weapon. The battle was brutal. Harvex pirates fought with desperate fury, knowing they were defending their territory. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Debris scattered through space. Warriors on both sides died by the hundreds. Far behind the battle line, human medical frigates moved carefully through the chaos. They picked up escape pods, recovered wounded, and pulled damaged ships to safety. Other species saw it as cowards' work, staying out of the real fighting. But the humans moved with strange precision. Their ships positioned themselves in specific patterns, forming geometric shapes that meant nothing to Coalition sensors. And they deployed more of those odd monitoring probes, scattering them through the battlefield like seeds. After 16 hours of fighting, the Coalition broke through. The Harvex pirates retreated, leaving the gate open. Thexcal declared victory, though his forces had taken 40% casualties. Still, they had won, and that was what mattered to a warrior. That night, celebrations filled the Dormath flagship. Warriors shared stories of glory. The Velixians displayed recordings of their most impressive strikes. Even the usually solemn Dormath joined the festivities. The humans were invited but didn't attend. Kozlov sent polite regrets, claiming her medical teams were too busy treating wounded. This only reinforced what the others believed. Humans weren't real warriors. They were support staff who couldn't handle the celebration of violence. But in the medical bays of human ships, something else was happening. Wounded Coalition soldiers reported strange experiences during the battle. A Krathier warrior, his armor cracked and leaking blue blood, grabbed a human medic's arm. "I saw something," the warrior whispered. "During the fight, when my ship was hit, I looked out the viewport and saw shapes, massive things moving in the darkness. But when I checked my sensors, nothing was there." The human medic's expression remained neutral. "You were injured. Sometimes pain causes hallucinations. I have fought in 50 battles. I know the difference between pain and reality." The warrior's mandibles clicked frantically. They were watching us, watching and waiting. Similar reports came from other survivors. A Velixian pilot described feeling surrounded by presence even when his sensors showed empty space. A Dormath telepath spoke of touching something vast and hungry at the edge of his mental range, then having it vanish before he could focus on it. The Coalition command dismissed these reports. "Battle stress," they said. "The mind playing tricks under pressure." Thexcal ordered everyone to focus on the campaign, not on ghost stories. But then the reports changed. 3 Harvex pirate bases went dark over the next week. Coalition scouts found them completely silent, power systems running but every light extinguished. When boarding parties investigated, they found the bases empty. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, just abandoned stations with crews missing. The ships were still there, undamaged and functional. Food was still on plates, weapons still in their racks, but every single pirate was gone. Perhaps they fled, a Velixian officer suggested, and left all their ships and supplies? Thexcal's voice carried skepticism. Pirates don't abandon valuable resources. The Dormath telepaths tried to find psychic traces of what happened. They sensed only terror, brief and overwhelming, then nothing, as if something had simply erased the pirates from existence. The Coalition fleet pushed deeper into Harvex territory, but now unease traveled with them. Warriors checked their weapons more often. Even the proud Krathir started keeping lights on in their corridors. The Velixians, beings of pure energy, reported feeling cold for the first time in their existence. And through it all, the humans remained at the rear, quiet and seemingly unconcerned. Admiral Kozlov received encrypted transmissions constantly now. Her officers spoke in careful code even on secured channels. The monitoring probes they deployed increased in number, creating a vast invisible network through space. A Dormath elder named Sethis decided to investigate the humans. She was ancient and powerful, her telepathic abilities among the strongest in the galaxy. Surely she could read the minds of simple humans and discover what they knew. She reached out with her consciousness, touching the mind of a human engineer working on a medical ship. Immediately, pain shot through her skull. It felt like touching static electricity, but mental instead of physical. Behind the static, she sensed something vast and dark, something that noticed her attention and turned toward it. Sethis broke contact with a gasp, her scales pale with shock. The human engineer hadn't even noticed her attempt. Whatever protected human minds did so automatically, without their conscious knowledge. She reported to Thexcal in private. Commander, the humans are not what they appear. Their minds are wrong, contaminated with something I cannot identify. Contaminated how? I cannot say. Every time I try to probe deeper, I encounter a presence that should not exist in a sentient mind. It feels old, Commander, older than our civilization. Thexcal dismissed her concerns, but his confidence was shaken. He ordered closer observation of human activities. His intelligence officers discovered something strange. The human ships weren't just randomly positioned at the rear. They moved in complex patterns, always maintaining specific distances from each other and from the rest of the fleet. The monitoring probes they deployed formed a 3-dimensional grid that surrounded the entire Coalition force. What are they monitoring? Thexcal demanded. No one had an answer. On the 20th day of the campaign, the Coalition fleet received a desperate transmission. It came from the Harvex warlord himself, broadcasting on all frequencies. Attention, Coalition forces. I know why you brought the humans. Please, we surrender. We will leave this territory. Just take them away. Don't let them release. The transmission cut off suddenly. When Coalition ships arrived at the warlord's last known position, they found his flagship drifting, all systems dark. The crew was gone, just like the others, but this time there were scratch marks on the interior walls. Deep gouges in metal that should have been too hard to damage, and in the darkness of the ship's corridors, some warriors swore they saw movement, shapes that shouldn't exist in vacuum, sliding through shadows that had no right to exist in zero gravity. Thexcal called an emergency meeting with all senior officers. This time, Admiral Kozlov's attendance was not optional. As she entered the conference room, every eye turned toward her. The human admiral looked as calm as ever. She took her seat and folded her hands on the table, waiting. Admiral Kozlov, Thexcal said slowly, I believe it is time you told us the truth. What exactly are the humans doing at the rear of this fleet? Before Kozlov could answer Thexcal's question, alarms screamed throughout the fleet. The main Harvex armada had been located near a dying red star. Thousands of pirate ships filled the space, their weapons hot and ready. We will finish this discussion later, Thexcal growled, rushing to his command station. All ships, battle positions. The Coalition fleet formed up for the largest engagement of the campaign. Krathir battleships took point, their warriors eager for glory. Velixian cruisers charged their weapons to maximum power. Dormith dreadnoughts spread their telepathic network across the entire force, linking every commander's mind. As the two fleets closed the distance, the Harvex warlord's voice came through again. This time his usual arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. "You fools! The humans brought them. Can't you see? We must retreat. All ships jump to emergency coordinates. Retreat now!" Confusion rippled through coalition ranks. Brought what? The humans were just support ships at the rear, but the Harvex pirates were already running. Ships powered their faster-than-light drives, trying to escape. They weren't fighting. They were fleeing in panic. Then the lights went out. Every light in the engagement zone died simultaneously. Energy shields flickered and failed. Even the Velixians, beings made of living energy, found their brightness dimming. The dying star behind them provided the only illumination, painting everything in deep red shadows. "What is happening?" Thexcal demanded. "Restore power!" "Systems are functional, Commander," his engineer reported, voice shaking. "But the lights won't respond. Something is suppressing all electromagnetic radiation in the visible spectrum." In the darkness, something moved. At first, it looked like asteroids drifting through space. But asteroids didn't move with such purpose. They didn't flow like liquid darkness between ships. They didn't have eyes that reflected starlight with an intelligence older than civilizations. A Krathier warrior on the outer edge of the formation screamed. The sound cut through the communication channels, pure primal fear. His ship's external cameras showed something massive pressing against the hull. A shape like a nightmare given form, all chitinous plates and limbs that bent in too many places. It was biological, alive, and it was the size of a frigate. "Fire!" Thexcal ordered.
"Fire on those things!"
Plasma bolts and energy beams lanced through the darkness, hitting the creature. It didn't even flinch. The weapons passed through it like light through water, doing no damage at all. The creature reached out with an appendage like an obsidian blade and casually tore a Harvex pirate ship in half. Metal screamed. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship died in seconds, and there wasn't just one creature. There were dozens, hundreds. They poured through the battlefield like sharks through water, moving impossibly fast in the vacuum. Every one of them ignored coalition ships and went straight for the Harvex pirates. It was a massacre. The creatures tore through pirate vessels with terrifying efficiency. Their blade-like limbs cut through armor. Their massive bodies crushed ships between them. And they made no sound, moving in perfect silence through the void. On the coalition flagship, Thexcal watched in horror. A creature approached his ship, growing larger in the viewport with every second. Its body was segmented like an insect but flowed like an octopus. Multiple eyes, each the size of a fighter craft, reflected the red starlight. Intelligence burned in those eyes. "Ancient and patient and utterly alien, weapons ready," Thexcal whispered. His mandibles clicked nervously. The creature was less than 100 meters away now. Suddenly, every screen in the coalition fleet came alive. Admiral Kozlov's face appeared, her expression more serious than anyone had ever seen it. "All ships, stand down." Her voice carried absolute authority. "Do not fire on them. They are with us." "With us?" Thexcal couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Those things are not your enemy," Kozlov interrupted. "Lower your weapons, Commander, or they will assume you're hostile." The creature outside Thexcal's viewport paused. It hung in space, motionless, its many eyes fixed on the flagship, waiting to see what the Krathier would do. Slowly, Thexcal gave the order to stand down. Around him, his crew obeyed with obvious reluctance. The creature watched them for a moment longer. Then, satisfied they posed no threat, it turned and glided away. Its movement through space should have been impossible without propulsion, but it moved anyway as if swimming through invisible currents. All around the battlefield, the creatures finished their work. The Harvex armada was destroyed completely. Not a single pirate ship remained intact. But every coalition vessel was untouched, not even scratched. The lights came back on gradually. Energy shields restored themselves. The universe returned to normal, except for the floating debris of thousands of destroyed pirate ships. And the creatures. They gathered near the human vessels at the rear of the fleet. Dozens of massive biological entities, each one large enough to threaten a warship, floated peacefully around the plain, gray human ships. On closer inspection, those human ships weren't so plain after all. Now that their systems were active, Coalition sensors detected sophisticated biocontainment fields around every human vessel. Energy signatures designed not for weapons but for communication. And symbols painted on their hulls, ancient writing that predated any known language. Thexkal's voice was barely a whisper. "Admiral Kozlov, what are those things?" Kozlov appeared on the main screen again. Behind her, through the viewport of her medical frigate, one of the creatures floated. It was so close that its eyes were visible in detail, each one showing rings of iridescent color. "Meet the Umbral," Kozlov said calmly. "They have been humanity's companions since before we reached the stars, since before we even left our caves." A Velixian officer's voice cracked with static. "Companions? Those are killing machines!" "Only to our enemies," Kozlov replied. "To humanity, they are friends. Family. We have kept their existence secret because the galaxy is not ready to understand. Every species that has tried to capture them, study them, or weaponize them has ceased to exist. We learned long ago that the Umbral must be protected, and in return they protect us." The Dormath elder Sethis spoke telepathically to everyone. "This is what I sensed in human minds. The contamination. You are bonded with these creatures. Bonded, yes. Every human carries a weak psychic link to the Umbral. We can sense them, call to them, and they respond. It's not contamination, Elder Sethis. It's symbiosis." Thexkal felt his world shifting. Everything he thought he knew about humanity was wrong. They weren't weak support staff. They weren't cowards hiding at the rear. They were keepers of monsters that could destroy entire fleets. "The monitoring probes," he said slowly, understanding dawning. "They were calling the Umbral, telling them where to go. Yes, the Umbral can travel through dark space following us anywhere. But they need guidance in normal space. Those probes act as beacons. And you volunteered for the rear guard position because it gave the Umbral the best strategic position to protect the entire fleet while eliminating our enemies. We put ourselves in the rear so they could hunt from the shadows." Kozlov's expression softened slightly. The Harvex pirates encountered Umbral before. Years ago they raided human space. They learned why that was a mistake. When they saw us joining this campaign, they knew what would follow us. One of the Umbral outside drifted closer to the flagship's viewport. Thexkal's warriors backed away instinctively, but the creature simply watched them with what might have been curiosity. Up close it was even more terrifying, and somehow hauntingly beautiful. "What do you want from us?" Thexkal asked quietly. "Respect," Kozlov answered, "and secrecy. The Umbral remain classified, but humanity gains equal command status in the Coalition. No more mock rearguard positions, no more being treated as inferior. The choice was clear. Accept humanity and their terrifying companions as true equals, or leave the campaign without them." Looking at the destroyed remains of the Harvex Armada, Thexkal knew there was only one answer he could give. An emergency coalition council convened aboard the Dormath flagship. Every senior officer was present, but now the humans sat at the main table instead of standing at the back. The Umbral floated outside the viewports, their massive forms creating shadows that moved across the room. Thexkal began the meeting with unusual humility. "Admiral Kozlov, I believe the Coalition deserves a full explanation. The truth about humanity and these Umbral." Kozlov stood, her hands resting on the table. She looked at each commander in turn, making sure they understood the importance of what she was about to share. "The Umbral are older than any civilization in the galaxy," she began. "They existed when Earth was still forming. They are void dwellers, creatures that live in the darkness between stars. They don't need air or food as we understand it. They feed on radiation and the energy of dying stars." A holographic display activated, showing images from Earth's ancient past. Cave paintings, primitive carvings, symbols scratched into stone. Humanity didn't evolve alone. When our ancestors lived in caves hiding from predators, the Umbral found us. They were curious about these small, fragile beings who feared the dark. So they made contact. The images showed humans and massive shadows working together, hunting together, surviving together. They taught us to survive in darkness, to hunt when we couldn't see, to fear less and think more. And we taught them something they'd never known before: companionship. The Umbral are intelligent, but they were alone in the universe. We gave them family. Elder Sethis leaned forward, her telepathic voice gentle but firm. "You bonded with them? On a psychic level?" "Yes. Over thousands of generations, humans and Umbral became connected. Every human baby is born with a weak link to them. We can sense their presence, feel their emotions, and they can feel ours. It's not controlling or dominating. It's partnership, a Velixian officer spoke up. But why keep them secret? Why hide such powerful allies? Kozlov's expression darkened. Because not every species wants partnership. Some want weapons. The holographic display changed, showing different alien species, none that anyone in the room recognized. 2,000 years ago, the Xylith discovered the Umbral. They tried to capture them, breed them, turn them into bioweapons. The Umbral destroyed their entire civilization in 3 days. Gasps around the table. 500 years ago, the Korthan Collective attempted the same thing. They built containment facilities, tried to study Umbral biology to create weapons. The Umbral left no survivors, more images flashed by. Different species, different eras, all with the same ending, complete extinction. The Umbral do not forgive attempts to enslave them. And humanity made a promise. We would protect them from those who would do them harm. In exchange, they protect us. Commander Park, Kozlov's first officer, added his voice. Our technology looks primitive to other species. Kinetic weapons instead of energy beams. Simple metal ships instead of energy shields. This is intentional. The Umbral are sensitive to certain advanced energy signatures. Too much electromagnetic radiation and they suffer pain. So you built your entire civilization around their limitations, Thexcal said, understanding dawning. Not limitations. Partnership requires compromise. We could have developed energy weapons, but why would we need them when the Umbral can destroy any threat? We focused on what they can't do. Build, create, heal, explore. They focused on what we can't do. Survive in the void, move through dark space, fight enemies that conventional weapons can't touch. The Velixian officer who had initially mocked humanity spoke now, his voice subdued. Your outdated technology is actually specialized equipment designed to work alongside living bioweapons. Living friends, Kozlov corrected firmly. Never call them weapons. They are people, just different from us. A young Krathir warrior asked the question everyone was thinking. If every human has this psychic bond, can you control them? Command them like troops? No, the bond isn't about control. It's about communication and mutual respect. We can call to them and they usually respond. We can share emotions and basic intentions, but they have free will. If they don't want to help, they won't. The Umbral stay with us because they choose to. Elder Cephas closed her eyes, her telepathic senses reaching out carefully. This time she knew what to look for. She touched the Umbral presence in Kozlov's mind gently, with respect instead of intrusion. What she found made her gasp. It wasn't contamination at all. It was beautiful, a connection deeper than words, older than language. She sensed the Umbral's affection for humanity, their protective instincts, their genuine care, and she sensed humanity's love in return, their determination to keep these ancient beings safe from exploitation. I understand now, Cephas whispered aloud. This is not master and servant. This is not even allies. This is family. Yes, Kozlov said simply. Thexcal stood, pacing with his forearms folded. The monitoring probes. You were calling them throughout the campaign, positioning them around us. The Umbral followed our fleet through dark space from the moment we left Coalition territory. Those probes helped them navigate and showed them where threats were located. When the Harvex pirates attacked, the Umbral already knew every ship's position. And the empty bases? The missing crews. The Umbral can enter ships through the smallest openings. They flow through corridors like living darkness. The Harvex crews never knew what took them. The Umbral don't kill for sport, only to protect us and eliminate threats. A Dormath commander asked, why did the lights go out during the battle? The Umbral can suppress electromagnetic radiation when they hunt. It's a natural ability, probably evolved to hide from predators in their early existence. In complete darkness, they're nearly invisible even to our eyes. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. The humans had volunteered for the rear guard specifically because it gave their terrifying companions the best position to strike. They had accepted mockery and contempt without complaint because they knew the truth would be revealed when it mattered. Everything about humanity's behavior suddenly made sense. Their patience, their willingness to take support roles, their calm acceptance of insults. They had nothing to prove because they knew what lurked in the shadows behind them. Finally, Thexcal turned to face Kozlov directly. You said you wanted respect and secrecy. The secrecy is necessary, I understand that now. Other species might try to use the umbral as we've seen before. But the respect, he paused. Admiral Kozlov, you have earned more than respect. You have earned our fear. Fear isn't necessary, Kozlov replied. The umbral only harm those who threaten us or try to capture them. To everyone else, they are no more dangerous than any other intelligent species. Less so, actually, since they have no interest in conquest or expansion. What do they want? To be left alone. To travel the dark spaces between stars. To know their human family is safe and thriving. That's all they've ever wanted. Thexcal made a decision. The Coalition accepts humanity's terms. Equal command status. Full voting rights on all decisions. And the umbral remain classified at the highest level. Any species that attempts to study or capture them will face the full force of Coalition justice. Around the table, other commanders nodded agreement. Even the proud Krothier warriors who respected strength above all could acknowledge what they'd seen. The Velixians who prized knowledge understood the value of keeping some secrets safe. The Dormeth, ancient and wise, recognized the beauty of the human-umbral bond. Kozlov allowed herself a small smile. Thank you, Commander. Then let's finish this campaign together, as true equals. Outside the viewports, the umbral stirred. They sensed the change in emotions, the shift from tension to acceptance. One of them pressed close to the transparisteel, its multiple eyes reflecting everyone in the room. And for just a moment, Thexcal could have sworn it looked pleased. The final target of the campaign loomed ahead, the Harvex warlord's fortress. It was a massive space station built into a dead planet, bristling with weapons and protected by layers of shields. Intelligence suggested it would take weeks of fighting to breach the defenses. But now the Coalition had new allies. Thexcal stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display. Beside him, appearing on a screen, Admiral Kozlov reviewed the same information. For the first time in the campaign, they were planning together as equals. The outer shields are strong, Thexcal observed. Even with our combined fleet, breaking through will cost many lives. We won't need to break through, Kozlov said calmly. The umbral can enter through the shield gaps. They're small, but the umbral can compress their bodies to fit through spaces much smaller than they appear. A Velixian tactical officer looked up from his station. The fortress has internal defenses. Automated weapons, armored blast doors, kill zones in the corridors. Kozlov smiled. None of which work in complete darkness. The plan came together quickly. The Coalition fleet would attack head-on, drawing attention and fire. While the fortress defenses focused outward, the umbral would slip inside and disable everything from within. Human handlers would guide them through the facility, using the psychic bond and detailed schematics. It was a strategy unlike anything the Coalition had ever attempted, but after seeing what the umbral could do, no one doubted it would work. The attack began at dawn, measured by the ship's artificial day-night cycle. Krothier battleships opened fire first, their plasma cannons hammering at the outer shields. Velixian cruisers added their energy weapons to the bombardment. Dormath dreadnoughts coordinated the assault with perfect telepathic precision. The fortress responded with devastating firepower. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Ships on both sides took damage, explosions lighting up the battle zone. But while everyone watched the spectacular fight, the real battle happened in silence. 30 umbral approached the fortress from different angles, their bodies barely visible against the stars. They found the microscopic gaps in the shield generators, places where maintenance ports and cooling vents broke the energy barrier. One by one, they squeezed through impossibly small spaces, their bodies flowing like water through cracks in a dam. Inside the fortress, alarm klaxons wailed. Harvex pirates rushed to defensive positions, weapons ready. They knew the humans had brought something terrible, and they knew it was coming. The lights went out. Every light in the entire facility died simultaneously. Emergency systems failed. Backup generators couldn't activate. The umbral's natural suppression field covered the entire station, plunging kilometers of corridors into absolute darkness. In that darkness, the umbral hunted. They moved through corridors with perfect knowledge of the layout, guided by human handlers watching through psychic impressions. They disabled weapon systems with precise strikes. They destroyed shield generators from inside. They cut through blast doors like paper. The pirates never stood a chance. Those who fought back found their energy weapons didn't work on the umbral. Those who tried to flee discovered there was nowhere to run. Those who tried to surrender in the darkness couldn't find anyone to surrender to. Within 3 hours, the fortress went silent. The coalition fleet, still hammering at the shields from outside, suddenly found all resistance gone. The shields dropped. The weapons stopped firing. Every system in the facility powered down except life support. Thexcal ordered a halt to the bombardment. Send boarding parties. Secure the station. Coalition troops entered cautiously, weapons raised, expecting traps or ambushes. What they found instead was an empty fortress. The Harvex warlord and his entire command staff were gone, along with most of the military personnel. Only a few hundred support staff remained, cowering in the lower levels. The Umbral had taken the rest. Where are the bodies? A Krathier warrior asked, searching a command center that should have been filled with enemy officers. There are no bodies, a human marine replied. The Umbral don't leave bodies when they eliminate threats. They dissolve organic matter completely. It's part of their feeding process. The warrior looked at the human with new respect and a little fear. That is efficient. That is the reality of what happens to humanity's enemies. The campaign was over. The Harvex warlord was gone, his fortress captured, his fleet destroyed. What coalition commanders had expected to take months had been accomplished in weeks, largely thanks to the Umbral. In the aftermath, something remarkable happened. Coalition soldiers began to see the Umbral differently. Yes, they were terrifying. Yes, they were deadly. But they were also strangely gentle with their human companions. A Velixian medic watched in fascination as an Umbral carefully returned a dead coalition soldier to a human medical ship. The creature, which could have torn apart a battleship, carried the body with surprising tenderness. It placed the fallen warrior inside the airlock with what could only be described as reverence. They understand death, the Velixian whispered. They honor it. All across the fleet, similar scenes played out. The Umbral helped repair damaged ships, their massive strength useful for moving heavy debris. They patrolled the perimeter, watching for any remaining threats. They even seemed to comfort wounded soldiers, their presence somehow calming instead of frightening when someone was in pain. On the final day before the fleet would return home, Thexcal found himself standing at a viewport, watching the Umbral float through space. One of them noticed him and approached, pressing close to the transparasteel. Its multiple eyes studied him with unmistakable intelligence. Thexcal raised one of his 4 hands in a gesture of respect. The Umbral tilted its massive head, then mimicked the gesture with one of its own appendages. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Admiral Kozlov approached, standing beside him at the viewport. They like you, she said. That one has been curious about Krathier warriors since the beginning. I think it respects your courage. I was terrified of them at first, Thexcal admitted. I am still terrified, if I am honest. But I am also grateful and humbled. Why humbled? He turned to face her. Because I mocked you. We all did. We called humans weak, primitive cowards. We relegated you to the rear guard as if you were barely worth acknowledging. And through it all, you knew the truth. You knew what followed you through the darkness. Yet you said nothing. You accepted our insults without complaint. We had nothing to prove, Kozlov said simply. The truly dangerous never need to announce themselves. We knew our moment would come. And when it came, you didn't use it to shame us. You simply showed us the truth. Thexcal performed a full Krathier warrior's salute, all 4 arms crossed over his chest. We mistook silence for weakness. We mistook patience for cowardice. We were fools, Admiral Kozlov, and I apologize for my species' arrogance. Kozlov returned the salute in the human manner, a simple hand to her heart. Apology accepted, Commander. Every species has its strengths. The Krathier have honor and courage. The Velixians have knowledge and innovation. The Dormith have wisdom and telepathy. And humanity? We have patience, and we keep our promises, especially to those who lurk in the shadows. Your promises to the Umbral. Yes, we promise to protect them from exploitation, to give them a safe place in the universe, to be their family when they had none. In return, they protect us. It's not a transaction. It's love. Thexcal watched the Umbral outside the viewport. It had been joined by several others, and they moved together in what might have been a dance or a conversation. Massive, deadly, ancient creatures playing in the void like children. They are beautiful, he said, surprising himself. Terrifying, but beautiful. Yes, Kozlov agreed. They are. The fleet prepared to return home. Ships formed up in their travel positions. And this time, no one laughed when the humans took the rear guard. Everyone understood now. It wasn't the position of cowards or support staff. It was the position of those who watched everyone's backs. The position of those who kept the fleet safe from threats that normal sensors couldn't detect. The position of guardians. As the fleet prepared to jump, Kozlov made a final log entry in her private records. They thought we were weak. They laughed at our primitive technology and our quiet acceptance of mockery. Let them. Let every species in the galaxy underestimate humanity, because we know what they don't. We are never alone in the dark. We carry the shadows with us, and in those shadows ancient friends watch and wait. The Coalition learned this lesson. Let us hope others learn it through alliance rather than conflict. The Umbral are patient, and so are we, but patience has limits and we have promises to keep. Outside her viewport, an Umbral floated past. It looked at her with eyes that held intelligence older than human civilization. And in her mind, through that bond that connected every human to these ancient beings, she felt its contentment. They were going home together as they always had, as they always would. Human and Umbral, family forged in the darkness before humanity learned to make fire. A partnership that would endure long after the stars themselves grew cold, and anyone foolish enough to threaten one would face the wrath of the other. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, and the Umbral followed through dark space, invisible shadows keeping watch over their small, fragile, beloved human companions. Forever.